Hi guys, so I'm Shakira Curry and this is my final presentation for Informatics 645 at Mercer University. Okay, so first we're going to talk about a risk analysis plan, and this plan is a starting point for how to plan out risk and how to handle these risks if they do come about. So it's just analyzing any risk that could come up in your organization and how they impact the organization and how to handle them. And when planning for these risks, it's important to be proactive with them so you can help either prevent them or if they do come about, know exactly how to handle them so it won't be too big of an impact on your organization. And some of these risks can have a bigger impact than others, so it's important to prioritize each risk, and the ones who will have a bigger impact should go at the top of the list. So once you analyze all the risks and think about the ones that could come up, you have to develop a risk management plan. And with a risk management plan, the team comes together to plan out the solutions for each risk and how to manage them should they ever happen. And each of these risks has a trigger, so what causes the risk to happen or what would cause the risk to happen. So you can work on either preventing those triggers or better managing them. And it uses the information from the risk analysis plan to decide which risk you should focus on and which risk should require more management than others. So in this particular scenario, we have Dr. X. One of the risks is Dr. X not having a username and password to access his patient's EHR at the nursing facility. And just a couple of these to go over. As far as the budget, the estimated total budget, it would be less than $100,000, and the impact of this risk affecting the budget would be low, and the probability of this risk even happening would be medium, so that this affecting the budget would be lower on the list of priorities. So to go down to one that will be higher on the list of priorities would be how much time it would take to complete the project, and that would be 2 to 6 months. But if this risk was to happen, it'll affect a longer period of time, because this will be longer that Dr. X wouldn't have access to the patient record, so that will be a higher impact, and the probability of this happening would be medium, since he has to see those patients. So if every time he goes in he doesn't have access, then that could cause a higher risk. So that would be number 2 on a priority list. So you would need to focus on that one more so than something that's lower down on a priority list. Another one that is of higher priority is the solution, and it having being dependent on the client, depending on the solution for normal operation. So the solution to him not having a username or password, he would depend on that because he would need to access the patient records. So that would be number 2 on the list as well. And the security and privacy considerations, that's extremely important. So that would be number 2 on the, it would score 2 on priority as well. Another risk would be Dr. X dictating to an offshore outsourced transcription service, and this wouldn't have very much of an impact on the budget as well, because it would be less than $100,000. And all of this is assuming that Dr. X works for a smaller private practice where not many of his patients would be affected. So in the first scenario, if something was to happen, the only person that would be affected would be the actual patient. So it wouldn't be all of his patients, it would be just that one. Same thing for this one. If it was affect them, it wouldn't be everybody, it would just be that particular patient. So as far as the budget, it would be lower on the priority list. It would score a priority of 4. As far as being higher on the priority list, it will also be this security and privacy of the information it will score 2, because if it's not secure and private, then it will have a higher impact on the Dr. X and his patient. Something that would be really low on the list would be the software available for testing. So anytime a new software is used, so if he was to use a new transcription service, it would have to be tested. So that's not really an issue. That's not something we're too much worried about. So it'd be low on the priority list, because no matter what, the solution should be tested to make sure that it works. So the next risk would be Dr. X having remote access to the patient's EHR. And this would have a bigger impact on the budget versus the last 2 risks, because if he has remote access, that means he can access the EHRs from anywhere. If his computer was to be hacked or stolen, he could lose not just that one patient's record, but all of his patient records, and that would cause more of an issue. So that needs to be higher on the priority list, because if he loses all his patient records, that's more money it'll take to recover those records, and more time it'll take to recover those records. So the security and privacy is also a higher impact on that one. And like the other 2 risks, the software available for testing is not really a priority, because it has to be tested regardless. And to what degree will the client be dependent on the solution? So whatever solution they come up with to remedy this risk, it would be, Dr. X would be extremely dependent on it, because he's used to having remote access to his EHR. So whatever they come up with, he would need to depend pretty much solely on it. So that will be higher on the priority list. It will score a 2. And this is the risk management plan. So this just goes through all the risks, the probability of them having them, how much they will cost, the trigger point, and what acts they go against, and how we will solve them. So one of the risks and its impact would be the misuse of patient data due to remote access. So that's just hackers or his computer being stolen, and that has a medium probability of happening. And the reason why it could happen is because he could feel like the remote access is more convenient, easier to access, and less time consuming, because he could go in, see the patient, and not have to rush to see the patient, then chart at the hospital. But it could also cause problems, like I said, with hacking or his computer being stolen. So you would make sure his passwords are secure, make sure the data is encrypted, he has very strong firewalls, he accesses it only over private networks, and just make sure that when he accesses it, he isn't around anybody who is not a part of the treatment team and could take the information and use it negatively, and that would violate the HIPAA Privacy Act. Another risk would be delayed patient care due to lack of physician access, so him not having access to the EHR, and this has a higher probability of happening, because every time he goes to see the patient, if he doesn't have access, then that will delay patient care each time he comes. And the reason why that could happen is because maybe he doesn't have that many patients at the facility, so they don't feel like he needs username and password, or he could be a new physician to that nursing facility. So how they could remedy that risk would be giving him a temporary username and password, and having him change it. Like, let's say he sees a patient 1 week and then doesn't have to see that patient for another month. Next time he comes in that month, he will have to change the username and password just for security purposes. But it's important that he has a username and password temporarily. And this would go against the Patient Safety and Quality Improvement Act, simply because the patient is not getting the quality of care he or she deserves if Dr. X can't access his records. The last one is inability to of the nursing staff to access the transcribed records because he used an outsourced offshore transcription service, and that would have a medium probability of happening because he doesn't have to use that service all the time, especially if they give him access to the patient record. And this is just used, the trigger point is him using this as a backup plan because he doesn't have access to the record. So how they could remedy this strategy would be approval from the nursing facility to use that particular transcription service that he was using, or use a transcription service that has a contract with the nursing facility, so it would be easier to transcribe that information and get it to the nursing facility where they could open it up and use it as well. And this will also violate the HIPAA Privacy Act, because if he uses that offshore transcription service and the patient's information gets hacked or gets into the wrong hands, that could go against the HIPAA Privacy Act. And these are my references.